I saw St. Mary's for the first time when Father Joe Martins was established or installed as parish priest back in 2001. So I came up from Hobart, where I was based at that time, and just for the Mass and the ceremony. It was a beautiful church then, and it had the reputation of being a beautiful church, but it was quite dark. I wouldn't say exactly gloomy, but the darkness certainly hid much of what was there underneath years of dust and defects of pollution and so on. And the stained glass windows probably were the problem, and partly because they were coated with decades of soot, and so the light simply wasn't entering into the church.
The church contains a significant collection of stained glass windows from a variety of different makers, manufacturers. This one, for example, is by a German company called Mayer, who operated in London and Munich. It's been cleaned. Any glass in it that was cracked has been replaced, and the colours have been perfectly matched. If you look at Christ in the middle panel, he's obviously a German, whereas if you look at Christ in the windows behind the high altar, they're English, and he's obviously English. So they found their subjects and they posed them in the different roles. The high altar, which was erected in the 1920s, is perhaps the most monumental marble artwork in Melbourne for its scale and also for its beauty. The plans were sent to Carrara in Italy, where it was manufactured, and sent out in pieces to Melbourne, where it was put together by the Melbourne firm of Hallett and Company, and unveiled to the absolute amazement of the congregation, who couldn't imagine that anything so beautiful could have happened here. It was in a bit of a precarious state when we undertook the restoration of the church, because bits had fallen off it, because it's pinned together with iron pins which had deteriorated over the years. So we've replaced all them with stainless steel, and we've also cleaned, as I said, the altar, particularly the scene of the Last Supper, copy of Leonardo da Vinci underneath the table of the altar. We're not sure who painted it, our St. Michael. It's a copy of an Italian painting by Guido Reni. It was probably painted by an itinerant Italian artist who was in Melbourne, and it was almost indecipherable. It was so dirty, it was covered in fly dirt, and it had been varnished with household varnish at some time in the past, so that had to be scraped off with surgical scalpels to reveal the colours that you see in it now. The stenciling had been painted over twice in some cases. It was easy enough to reveal by stripping the paint off, but then we had to recut the stencils. It's an extraordinary colour scheme, I think, but somehow or other it works. Gothic Revival architecture is just not pointed architectural elements. Everything about it is symbolic. For example, the high altar is on 3 steps, symbolic of the Trinity. There are 12 columns which hold up the nave, symbolic of the 12 apostles. The nave is the place where the people of God gather, and the people of God will be judged eventually. So therefore they look up to the great judgment scene of the benign Christ looking down on them. That's what it all means. That's what the architect of the time and the priests of the time understood. And that's why it becomes a great house of prayer and a great house of faith, because there is something everywhere which reminds you of the immaterial, which you achieve through a material object. This little chapel is dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary under her title of Mary, Help of Christians, who is also the principal patroness of Australia. It also indicates that Mary doesn't do anything of her own accord. It's all together with her son Jesus, whom she's holding in this pose. Most Gothic Revival buildings, particularly cathedrals, have an angelic choir up above, looking down on you, so that you realise that they are there to greet you as the ship, which is what the nave really is, goes ahead. You're guided by them. And in the case of St. Mary's, the angels guide you to the sanctuary in the apse of the church, where the great sacrifice of the Mass takes place, and the archangels look down on you from there. That's Michael and Gabriel.